Hi guys, it's Sam from Made by Erlen. Thank you for joining me today for this tutorial. This is the newest pattern by Belle Originals. This is the Fab Flap Bag. I'm super excited for this one. This is such an amazing pattern, especially for beginners. But even if you've made a few bags like myself, there's still a few new things to learn. The internal slip pocket in this bag, I've never done anything like it. I love it. I'm probably going to incorporate it into some of my other bags as well that I do. So let's have a little look-sees. So first of all, why is this bag such a great beginner bag pattern? So hardware wise, it's minimal hardware. So there is a magnetic snap, D-rings, webbing, one zipper, as well as hardware for a crossbody strap if you would like to do a crossbody strap for this bag. Second of all, construction method. It gives you a few skills to learn. First of all, box bottom. So for those of you who've never done a box bottom, this is fantastic. It gives you that depth without having to do a gusset. So it's a bit of an easier sew, but it's also got some elements in there that for some of us might be completely new. For me, quilting. I've never quilted before and I quilted this one. It's so fun. I absolutely love it. Okay, let's have a look at the features of this bag. So first of all, you've got your handheld strap. You have your D-rings that you can convert this into a crossbody bag or a shoulder bag. The measurements are there for both. You have on the external, you have a front slip pocket, a back slip pocket. The main compartment is accessed by a magnetic snap. Open it up. Inside you have a zipper pocket. And on the other side, the slip pocket. This is super fun. So it's unlike normal slip pockets that I do. I've never done one like this. It looks like, I don't know how to get you guys in there, but it looks like a little rectangle and then it slips straight in. That's super fun. I love it. So that's the basic of the bag itself. Now, why should you get this pattern over other patterns? First of all, like I said, there's a couple of fun little things in there that I've never done before. So that really loved that. It produces a beautiful bag. Look at that. And Cindy has written this pattern so that you can use different types of fabric too. So the way Cindy's written it, she's given you measurements for all your interfacing or your stabilizer, or if you don't want to use stabilizer, that's possible too. So yeah, absolutely love it. The bag comes together so smoothly, so beautifully. I had a ball making this, so I can't wait to sew with you guys. Okay, let's get sewing. Okie doke, so let's talk a little bit about the materials and hardware that we're going to need for the Belle Original Fab Flap Bag. Okay, one of my favorite things about this pattern is how easy this is to cut. So, and how little hardware you need. So this is the perfect bag from that perspective, especially for a beginner who is just starting to think about their bag making journey. Now, I've made a couple of changes from the pattern, but I will tell you about it, okay? Nothing's sinister or nothing dramatic, but yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so for my version, I am going to be doing a all vinyl exterior, so all vinyl faux leather. So for my slip pocket and my flap, I am using a butter smooth faux leather from Inklings and the Kraken here in Australia. This is one of their exclusive prints. It's absolutely stunning. I am using the same color faux leather vinyl for the main exterior upper as well as the lower. And then for the inside, I am using mainly for the pockets. This is a Vibrant Vu from Sophisticated Supplies. This is the color Poseidon. So I love this if you haven't watched any of my other videos before because it is waterproof. It doesn't fray. I say that as this bit is fraying. That's because I've cut too close to the selvage there. You can see. Oops, sorry, right there. Because I'm cheating a little bit. But yes. So, yeah, Vibrant Vu from Sophisticated Supplies. So it is waterproof. It doesn't fray, so I don't need to interface. And it holds good structure. So that's what I'm using for all of my pockets. And for the internal lining, I am using Sophisticated Twill by Sophisticated Supplies. This is in the color Peacock, I'm pretty sure. So again, like the Vibrant Voo, it is waterproof, it doesn't fray, so I don't need any interfacing, interfacing is one of my pet peeves. You watch a few of my videos, you'll realize anything that doesn't require interfacing, I'm there. Okay, so what do I have different than the pattern in terms of my fabric? So the fabric, in the pattern instructions, there is also measurements for all of your interfacing as well as all of your stabilizer. At this point, I've not cut any interfacing or stabilizer because I'm not 100% sure if I definitely don't need interfacing because I've purposely chosen all fabrics that don't need interfacing. The stabilizer, because I'm already doing an all vinyl exterior bag, I don't think I need the stabilizer for this style bag. So I'm leaving that to play it by ear because the stabilizer that I tend to use is this one. It's a self-adhesive foam from Sophisticated Supplies again. This is the Sophiesive Light. So it's a self-adhesive foam that you just stick on. So I don't need to make any decisions now because I can just cut it and stick it on later on, to be honest. It's really that simple. Yep, so that's why I don't have any stabilizers or interfacing cut. If you are using easy fray fabrics like canvas, like cotton woven, some waterproof canvases don't fray, so double check on that. I know the waterproof canvas from Inklings and the Kraken doesn't fray, so I never interface that either. But depending on your fabric choices, you might need interfacing and stabilizer. So if you are completely new to bag making, you've stumbled upon me and this is your first bag and you're hoping I will give you the magic answer, if you are using cotton woven, which most likely you will, that's what I used for my first bag, you will need to interface and you will need to stabilize. The stabilizer that Cindy's given us for the Belle's Original Fab Flap Bag is fusible fleece. Fusible fleece is really easy to source from most crafting stores, even here in Australia. So it's super easy to find. It's an easy stabilizer to work with, especially for your first bag. So it is a fantastic choice for a first bag stabilizer, okay? Now, let's keep going. Oh, I will also need some stabilizer scraps for my flap. So I will be using this as well for my stabilizer scraps. Now, moving on to hardware. So I will be doing both a hand handle as well as a crossbody strap. So we need some webbing. This is again where I've differed from the pattern. So the handheld strap calls for 1-inch webbing, which I have. The crossbody strap calls for 1.5-inch webbing. I'm using 1-inch webbing. Main reason is because I'm being vain and I like this color to go with that. The only 1.5-inch webbing I have at the moment is black or purple and neither go with my bag. So I'm cheating and I'm using 1-inch. So the other hardware that we need is D-rings. So the D-rings, the pattern calls for 1-inch D-rings. Again, if you do not have 1-inch D-rings and you have made bags before, make the adjustments on that D-ring tab so that you can use a smaller or larger D-ring. I am using 1-inch, so I am doing it exactly per the pattern. We need some magnetic snaps. So make sure your magnetic snaps also come with the washers. So they should, but just double check that they do, okay? Oopa. We then also have, if you are doing the crossbody strap like me, you will have your crossbody strap hardware, which is your 2 swivel hooks as well as your adjuster. So I am using 1-inch, which differs from the pattern because remember, I am using 1-inch webbing for my crossbody strap. If you are doing 1.5-inch webbing for your crossbody strap, you need 1.5-inch hardware for these, okay? And last but not least, zipper. We need 1 zipper pull and 1 zipper tape. Nice and easy. All the measurements are in the pattern, so I'm not going to give the measurements away. But yeah, that's everything. See, super simple, nice and easy. So let's get going. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the notions that you might find helpful in making this bag. Like I've said, this bag is a perfect beginner bag. So there's not a lot of stuff that you need This is what I like to have, but this is what I like to have as my bare minimum anyway when it comes to bag making. So first of all, we need some clips, a fabric safe pen to mark your fabric. So I am using one of those silver wipe away pens for vinyl. If you are using cotton woven or anything like that, you might even be using chalk. You could be using heat erasable pens. The choice is up to you, but that's my one there. Seam ripper, because I believe in the seam ripper curse. If my seam ripper isn't within grasp, I will need it. My pokey stick, my stiletto. So this isn't necessary. For me, it's super necessary when I'm filming because it keeps my fingers out of the way for the camera angle. But I've also found if you are relatively new to sewing and you want to get into some of the trickier patterns, a stiletto / pokey stick is a super helpful tool to get used to. So I now use them pretty much on all my patterns, okay? Painter's tape, because I have a weird obsession with painter's tape. It's probably not necessary, but I like to have it just in case. Double-sided tape. I personally don't tend to use it, but I know a lot of people who love using double-sided tape, and it's great for keeping things in place, especially as a new bag maker when we're doing the zipper. So I'm going to keep that in here for you guys. A lighter to singe your zipper tapes and your webbings and whatever else needs singeing. So I've got a normal lighter as well as a fancy buzzer lighter. A hump jumper. So especially because I am working with vinyl faux leather, I will have quite a bit of differences in height. So I have my hump jumper at the ready and a ruler. So Cindy in her tutorial, in her instructions, she uses a yardstick. I don't have a yardstick. I know yardsticks exist in Australia, but I don't have one. So this is the only ruler that I've got. It is about 1 inch wide. Why is that important? You will see soon. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. I don't know. But yeah, just so you guys know, it's 1 inch wide. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Okie dokie, so let's head straight on, and we're going to be prepping our exterior upper first of all. So like I've said in the intro, I'm not using stabilizer yet at this point. This is the wrong side of my fabric. But if you are, what we're going to do is you're going to adhere your fusible fleece first. So you will center it and fuse it on, and then you're going to top it off with the interfacing. Okay, so fusible fleece first and then interfacing on top of that. So what that will do is it will give you a lovely clean surface to draw all your quilting lines on. Okay, now after you've done that, this is what we're up to. We've got our fabrics. I'll do one at a time. So with Cindy, she actually does the quilting lines on the back of the fabric so that you can then take it over to the sewing machine and you can sew along the back. I'm not doing that. The only reason is because with my thread, I can't fit thicker threads in my bobbin, and I want to have a nice beautiful thread that will show through on the top. So I'm going to be using, so I will be having to draw the lines on the top of my fabric. So it means that afterwards I will have to get rid of these lines. So I have to use a fabric safe pen, which is what this is. Now, I'm not going to bring my ruler on to draw the lines because I don't want to give away the measurements. Oh, actually, I should be able to. I can. I'm going to bring it on upside down. That's what I'm going to do. Ta-da! Yep, there's no measurements on there. Okay, so I've mentioned before that Cindy uses a yardstick for hers. I don't own a yardstick, so I cannot use a yardstick. This is the ruler that I have, and I'm going to use this. It doesn't matter how you draw these quilting lines, and I'm going to admit something to you guys here right now. I've never quilted before. This is my first go at quilting ever. So this might be super fun or super horrible. I don't know which way it's going to go yet, but you guys are here with me and you guys will get to see. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quilting line that is diagonal from the top corner all the way down to the bottom. Obviously my ruler isn't long enough, so I'm going to sneakily grab a different ruler, draw that and come straight back. Okie dokie, so I've drawn my first line, which goes from the diagonal top to the diagonal bottom. And then I'm going to grab my other ruler, which if you are Cindy, is a yardstick. Mine is not. It's just this little guy here. And I'm going to just measure that width away and do my second line. And then I'm going to continue on all the way across that way. And then I'm also going to do the same with that diagonal this way as well. So I'm going to quickly turn you guys off so I can draw that and then pop back on, because I don't want the ruler in here for too long. It's dangerous because this is all Cindy's proprietary information, right? So if I give away all the measurements on here, then Cindy has just spent months working on this pattern for nothing. But anyway, I'll quickly put you guys on hold, draw it all, and bring you guys back. Okay? Okie dokie. So that's all drawn up now. So that's all my quilting lines. I'll need to do it on both pieces. I'll do that off camera later on. So that's it all drawn up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew on them. Now I should have mentioned the quilting, you don't have to do if you don't want to do, okay? That's a little secret there for you to save a bit of time, a bit of, if you're completely new, if you don't have any experience sewing, and this is literally the first thing you've decided to do, feel free to skip this part, okay? The quilting adds a beautiful design element to it, but it's not a necessity, okay? So what I'm going to do now that I've got all of my sew lines down, I've got these beautiful diamonds. Oh, and it doesn't have to be done in this way. So I told you my ruler was about 1 inch wide, and so I was doing 1 inch apart. You don't have to do it that way. If you wanted to make them like squares instead of diamonds, you can do that. If you wanted to do circles, loop-de-loops, if you are an amazing quilter that has definitely a billion million times better skills than I do when it comes to quilting, because I have no idea, feel free to do whatever works for you, whatever you think looks right. But this is what I am doing. Okay, so we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to get quilting. So we're going to sew all along the sew lines, every single one of those lines. And yeah, let's get going. Okie dokie. So we're at the sewing machine. We're going to begin sewing. I have something else I need to admit to. So I've been away for a week and a bit. So on a cruise with my family. So this is the first time I've touched a sewing machine in 2 weeks. So maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic, thinking the first thing I'm going to do is sew beautiful sew lines, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, so like I said before, we're sewing on top of these lines. Like I am backstitching there. You should not be backstitching. I am only doing it because I am. Okay, so like I said before, Cindy does it from the bottom. So she does it with the top exterior down, facing down, and she draws the sew lines on the bottom. I am doing it the other way around. You can see I'm going super slow because I am hand cranking. There is no shame in hand cranking, everybody, okay? I've also started from the longest line, so right down the center. There is no reason for it apart from just, that's what I've decided to do. And so we are just sewing right on that line. Cindy has also given us a stitch length recommendation. She uses a stitch length of 3.0. I'm not going to lie, as you guys can see, I sew with a vintage sewing machine. I don't actually know what those stitch lengths mean. My machine has stitch lengths, but I have no idea what any of it means. I just use the highest stitch I can, because to me this is a top stitch. So with that, I just use the longest stitch length I've got on my machine. And I'm using a beautiful, fun rainbow thread. So let's hope for the best here. Okay. So that's the first line. I'm going to be doing all of the sew lines that I've drawn. It's so pretty. Okay. So here we go. Let's just keep sewing. Change that a tiny bit. Something I should just quickly mention as well, you might notice that I leave quite long tails at the end. That's just something I like to do when it comes to top stitching, because like I said, I don't back stitch, so my stitches aren't locked off. But if I have long thread tails, it kind of seems to help with the unraveling. And then when I'm sewing the other pieces together, the long thread tails get caught and then you're not going to have any unraveling later on. Dokie, and then now the other direction too. There we go. So that's the one piece done. I'm going to do the second piece off camera because I don't think you guys want to sit here and just watch me stitch top stitch lines, but it's beautiful. I'll take us back over to the overhead. I'll get the marking lines wiped off and we'll keep going. Okie dokie. So that's all the stitch lines sewn on. So if, like me, you did it on the right side of the fabric, we just now need to remove all of your sew lines, whatever works for you. Here's a tip for you guys. I know some people struggle with silver pens sometimes. What I find works really well is don't use wet wipes. Use a towel. Really grab a lot of water onto it and then just slowly go at it. Don't just do it in one direction either. I'm using litchi fabric. Is that how you say it? I don't know how you say it. Litchi fabric. So obviously there's grooves in that. So if any vinyl is the worst type to do this on, it is litchi, because there's grooves and it just gets caught everywhere, but it does come off. You just need to have a good go at it. Okay, so I will slowly do that one because you guys don't want to watch me do that, but here's something I prepared earlier. It's so fun. I am loving this. It's so cute and completely one of a kind. Okay, so that is your front upper exterior. So we're going to put these aside now and we're going to be working on the exterior slip pockets. Okay, so let's put this aside. Let's grab our exterior slip pockets in. Clean my table a little bit. Okie dokie. So the cut list tells us to cut 4 pieces of this for the exterior slip pocket. So what it actually is it's 2 pieces of the exterior, so the side that you'll see, and 2 pieces of the lining, so the side that you won't see. So this is on the outside of the bag, and this is when you look inside the pocket, that. So of course you can use exactly the same fabric if you'd like, but because I am using faux leather, I don't want to do 2-sided faux leather. Like it's too thick. I sew on a domestic machine, so I cannot do 2-sided. Oh, I could, but it's too thick. Don't do it. Just don't do it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grab our clips. We're going to match 1 piece of the exterior to 1 piece of the lining, right sides together. That's me feeling for the right side. Right sides together, and we're going to clip along the top edge if your fabric is directional. Okay, so along the top edge. So right sides together, clipping the top edge. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, if you'd like to, Cindy's given us a little tip here for beginners especially, but for anyone as well, if you struggle with sewing straight lines, is if you'd like to, you can now draw a sew line on there. So you can draw a sew line of a 1/4 inch down, or we can just head straight over to the sewing machine. We can sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance just along that top edge there. Then we're going to open it up, press those seams, and then top stitch it with a 1/8 seam allowance. But I'll talk you through it over at the sewing machine. So I'll quickly get this one clipped and we'll head over to the sewing machine. Before we head over to the sewing machine, I just wanted to mention this. So I did say we're only clipping and sewing the top long edge. So in Cindy's instructions, she actually says top and bottom, so the 2 long edges, okay? The reason I'm not doing this is mainly to do with the fact that I am using faux leather, okay? And I am sewing on a domestic, so I don't want too many seams. If you wanted to sew top and bottom, you can. So the reason I'm not doing the bottom is because the bottom is going to be sewn down anyway when the bottom panel, the bottom half comes on. So it's not going to be a raw edge even though I don't sew it now. But if I sew it now, it means when I do the bottom edge and I top stitch that, it's going to be a lot of layers, especially because I am working with faux leather. So that's why I'm only doing the top. Now, if you are working with a different type of material, you wanted to do top and bottom, that is fine. If you're working with a different type of material and you just want to do the top like me, that's also fine, okay? So let's head over. Okie dokie, so first of all, we are top stitching with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Like I said, if you wanted to draw sew lines down, that is a great way, especially when you are first starting to sew and getting your sew lines or your seam allowances perfectly straight. But yep, just a 1/4 inch along that top edge with the exterior pocket, the exterior and the lining facing right sides together. Okie dokie. Just going to quickly do the second piece too. Okay, like I said before, you may choose to sew the bottom as well. I am not doing that because of the material choices that I'm using. So what we're going to do next is, move this a tiny bit. We are going to open this up and press the seams so that press that seam open, and we're doing that on both pieces as well. I like to, when I'm working with faux leather, just put a little clip down on the bottom. To me, it helps pull all the fabric together, especially because faux leather doesn't necessarily finger press that well sometimes. Okay, we're doing it with the second piece as well. And then we are going to bring it back under the sewing machine or into the sewing machine. And then we're going to top stitch that edge with a 1/8. Again, if you are doing both the top and bottom, then you will top stitch both the top and bottom edge, okay? There we go. Okay, so we are just top stitching that top edge. And we're just doing it on the second piece as well. Okay, now here's a little tip for you. It's not in Cindy's pattern, but I just like to add this in, especially if you are newish at sewing and you are doing what I'm doing and just doing that top edge. We can quickly baste the bottom. So if you quickly baste the bottom, which all it is just doing a little line of stitches within the 1/8 seam allowance, that will baste the lining and the exterior together so that this is no longer flapping about. And that sew line will get hidden up when we sew. So it just means everything is now held together and you have a lovely piece of slip pocket. So I'm just going to do that quickly on this one as well. Again, this is obviously not necessary if you had sewn that edge together. This is only because I didn't sew that edge together, and this way I just keep everything straight and easily managed without having to deal with clips. Okay, so that's all done. Let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep moving on. Okie dokie, so this is where we're up to. We have quilted that top exterior. We have sewn our exterior slip pockets. We're now also going to grab our webbing grab handles through. Okay, so now first off, what we're going to do is we're going to mark center points, okay? So if you like to mark with a pen, you can. I tend to mark with scissors. So I just fold it in half so I can find the bottom corner, just snip a little snip in there. And I'm going to do that for the bottom corner for the slip pockets, the bottom edge of the slip pocket. And I'm also going to do it for top and bottom of my exterior piece. Now, I mentioned it before, but in case you didn't hear me say it or you skipped past that bit because you didn't quilt, yes, I have a lot of loose threads here. I like to keep it like that. It looks super messy, but for me, it helps me keep all the threads together, I guess, in some way. So that's why I leave it all there and clean it up later. So I am marking top and bottom on the exterior upper piece. So if your piece is directional, obviously that's important. If it's not, then you are like me. Okay, so we're going to work on one piece at a time. So first of all, we're going to grab one of our external upper pieces. We're going to grab one of our slip pocket pieces. We're going to match the bottom center to the bottom center, like that, and then we're going to clip it in place. Okay. So that is going to be your placement for the slip pocket. Okay, then we're grabbing our webbing. Now, if you haven't done it already, and I say this because I haven't done it, singe the ends of your webbing now. So this is just, especially if it is a seatbelt webbing like I'm using, it's just good housekeeping so that it doesn't fray later on. If anyone is in the market for a new lighter, I highly recommend these things. Jen, my friend from Jen's Homemadeology, suggested this to me, and you can get them easily on Amazon. This is called, I think they're called candle lighters or electric lighters, something like that. But yeah, amazing. They're rechargeable, so you don't go through a billion lighters. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find the center point of your webbing. If you are using seatbelt webbing like mine, there's a super obvious center, so it makes it really easy. And I'm just matching the center with the part that my slip pocket, so this is the center, and I'm just matching it so the center is right on the spot where my slip pocket is on the exterior. Okay, so that means it's half on the slip pocket and half on the exterior, if that makes more sense. Does it? I don't know anymore. Okay, I'm going to clip that in place there. Now, here's a little tip for you. If you would like, you can use double-sided tape right down the middle to stick it down. I don't like to do that because I don't like double-sided tape. In all honesty, I don't like double-sided tape. My sewing machine doesn't like it. I don't like it. Okay, now when we come across to the other side, the main thing to bear in mind is that your webbing isn't kinked. It is, that's why I do one side first, so that it's straight, and then I can double check my top as I bring it back down. So when I say it's not kinked, so this is the right way, I don't want it like this. See how then there's a kink in it, and it will never be flat. So make sure there's no kink in it, and it is facing the right way. Again, we're matching the center to the slip pocket there and clipping it in place. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a measurement up from the slip pocket. Now, the measurements are in the instructions. I'm not going to give them away, but I'm going to quickly measure it. And you can either draw it onto your webbing with a erasable pen of some sort. I have found that I don't have a lot of luck with removing pen from seatbelt webbings, so I don't do that. I use painter's tape. So I'm going to quickly measure it, and I'll stick my painter's tape down so I can explain it a little bit more. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Okay, there we go. So I've marked it and I've stuck it down. So what I've done is I've marked so I've measured from the slip pocket up, and then what I've done is I've put that tape right on where that measurement is. Okay, so my painter's tape now holds my strap down, but it also is a measurement for me. So see, painter's tape, it's magical. I love it. I don't have shares in it. I should. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. You're going to sew all the way up on one edge. You're going to come back along there where you made the marking, English, Sam. And then you're going to come back down that edge, okay? Now, you can, if you would like to, sew a small box here. So I've got other patterns where I've sewn boxes before. All it is it's a little rectangle and you've got your crosses in it. I'm not going to do it on this one. Cindy has said that it's not necessary for this bag. I am with her, especially since this is just a grab handle. If you'd like to, please do it. But to keep this beginner friendly, I am not doing it. Okay? We're doing it on this side. We're then doing it on this side. And we're also doing it on the other piece. So I'm going to get the second piece ready now. and then we'll head over to the sewing machine and we'll get that all sewn down. Okay, let's head over to the sewing machine. Okay. Here's a little trick for you before we sew on this webbing. So I like to match my thread color, my top thread color anyway, as closely as I can to my webbing. So when I'm doing this, so I'm sewing the webbing on, because it helps hide any imperfections, I guess, when you're sewing, especially if you are going to do the box stitch. Like I said, we're not doing the box stitch, but it's just what I'm used to. I like to just match my fabric, my thread color to the webbing as closely as possible. So that's my biggest tip for doing this little bit here, okay? So like I said, we're going to sew this down now. Okay, so let me just quickly change the stitch length here. And we're going to sew it down. So we're going to do it as close to the edge as possible on the webbing. I like to do it roughly 1/8. It's probably a little bit less, but it doesn't really matter that much. Okay. Now, if you need a hump jumper, which you might have noticed that I do, make sure you have that at the ready. Because there is obviously a bit of height differences here that we need to make sure we are accounting for. Now, I'm just double checking that everything is lined up and straight. Now, as I said before, I don't have a marker marking where I'm sewing to. I'm using the tape. So excuse me if you see my head. Just double checking how close I need to get. There we go. So you reach the mark that you have drawn, and then we're coming across. And then back down. Now you could end it right here because you have made the edge. I like to just come back across. It just helps me secure it all and lock off some of these loose threads. There we go. And then we're going to do that on the other side as well. Now, as you can see here, I don't know how well you guys can see that. There's a big gap there. So that's the reason why I need my hump jumper. It's worse because I am using vinyl so that there is a bigger height difference, okay? Okie dokie. Now, one thing I like to do after I've sewn that on is just to double check that I didn't skip any stitches, okay? So I'm just flipping over to the back because the back it's easier for me to see my stitches because I matched my front colors. And I'm just double checking in particular here. Yep, there's no skip stitches at all. And we are perfectly all done. There we go. So that's all sewn down now. And I'm just going to do the second piece exactly the same way. And there we go. So that's the straps all done. So let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep going. Okie dokie. So here we go. So this is the front panels that we've just done where we've sewn the grab handles on and it's beautiful. So we're going to move on to the lower exterior. Okay, so we'll put these aside for now. We're still going to need them soon, so don't put them too far. We'll grab our lower exterior pieces. Now, first of all, if you are using stabilizer, what we're going to do now first is we're going to fuse our fusible fleece onto the back, again centered to the piece, and you're doing that on both pieces. and then your stabilizer to go on top of that, exactly like what you would have done on the top piece, the upper piece. Now, like I've said, I'm not using any stabilizer or interfacing, so this is just what I am. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to mark squares, okay? So you can see that I've already done that off camera. Now, the squares are on the bottom corners, okay? So there is a measurement that Cindy has given us from the bottom and from the side, okay? The measurement is from the edge of your stabilizer, okay? So from the edge of your fusible foam, okay? So, and not from the edge of the panel, okay? So just to give you a better idea in case you don't understand what I'm saying, let's pretend this is your fusible foam right there. You are measuring from here up and from here up, okay? Not from the exterior, but from the fusible foam, okay? If, like me, you are not using fusible foam, how are you working that out? You're adding a 1/4 inch. It's really just that easy. You're adding a 1/4 inch to that measurement, okay? And that's what that is. And then we've got the rectangles for this square bottom, for the box bottom, sorry. So what we're going to do first is we're going to cut out those rectangles, squares, box bottom. We're going to cut these out, okay? Quick plug. If that looked super awkward watching me cut that out, it's because it is. I'm not used to cutting them like this. But obviously this is how we all start, is with a ruler and scissors and no extra equipment, right? But if you are loving this method of construction of box corners, you can get a handy tool called a boxed corner ruler. Here in Australia, I got mine from Brymax here in Australia. She makes them acrylic rulers, and it is called the Universal Boxy Corners tool. That's what it looks like. Mine has been used so much, you can tell it's even been broken, and I've super glued it back together. But what it's really great for is you line up your box corner, see how it's got your inches and whatever. So you line it up, and then you have your rotary cutter, and you just cut straight in. It even has grooves to allow you to cut super easily. Yeah, it's one of my most used tools. I always use it whenever I'm doing boxy corners. Hence why me using scissors looks so awkward. Actually, just to be honest, me using scissors is just awkward at the best of times. I'm horrible with scissors. Okay, anyway, so let's keep moving on. So we've cut those corners. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grab the top panel that we've done before. Just grab one of them. We're going to match it right sides together with the lower part. The boxes are on the bottom. So we're going to match that right sides together, center to center, okay? They should match up exactly the same width-wise. If they don't, okay, because I like to always tell people about why it won't match up. If they don't, it's because, there's a couple of reasons. It's because A, you didn't cut your fabric right, which happens to me more than I care to admit. B, it is because when you quilted your upper piece, you might have accidentally shrunk the fabric a little bit. So your fabric may have stretched or condensed, or I don't know what the right word is. Something's happened there, okay? So that's why if it doesn't match up perfectly like this, look for your centers, match center to center and clip, okay? That's your best way to get it nice and perfect. Okay, so we're doing that with the second side as well. So again, right sides together, the two straight edges against each other, center to center, and clip it together. Okie dokie. So now that that is all clipped together, we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're then going to open it up and we're going to top stitch, but along the bottom edge of the bag, okay? So not along this section, along this section with a 1/8 seam allowance, okay? And we're doing that on both pieces, but follow me over to the sewing machine and whoopsies. Follow me over to the sewing machine and we'll talk through it. So 1/4 inch, open it up, top stitch. Let's go. Okie dokie, we're back at the sewing machine and we are going to sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, bearing in mind, depending on your fabric choices, you will need your hump jumper because where the pocket starts coming up, it's obviously a fair bit bulkier than where there isn't a pocket. So just make sure you have it at the ready for when you need it. Okay, so 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. So that's all sewn together. Now what we're going to do is we are going to open it up. This is upside down. I'm going to open it up. If you need to seam press it. And we are going to top stitch along the lower part. Okay, we're going to top stitch along that bottom edge. Bottom edge? The lower exterior side. English, Sam, English. Okay, make some space. Okay. Go and top stitch, so it's a 1/8 seam allowance along the bottom edge, okay? Still bearing in mind that some people might need a hump jumper as you come around here, okay? Because there is quite a height difference in the materials, okay? I am hand cranking because when I hand crank, I can listen to my machine and listen out for a jump stitch to fix it before it's too late. Okay, there we go. So that's one panel done. And I'll just quickly do the second one. So like I said, we are sewing it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then top stitching with a 1/8. This time I'm doing it from the other side. Is there a reason? No, there isn't. I just like to switch it up sometimes for me. Okie dokie, all sewn together. And then again, we're opening up and top stitching towards the lower exterior panel. Beautiful. There we go. That's our top and bottom and lower exterior sewn together. So let's head back over to the overhead and we will keep moving on. Moving on, let's start working on the flaps. So these are our flap pieces. They're cut straight from the cutting list. Now, if you would like the corners rounded, like Cindy has made hers, I'm going to show you how to do it because I also like rounded corners. Now, if you have a fancy corner cutter tool like this, you can then choose whatever corner you like, match it up to the bottom and measure it and draw it beautifully. That's super easy. Now, most of us don't have those corner tools. Like I said, this pattern is aimed at beginners, so I assume most of us don't have fancy tools. I only just got that last month and I've been sewing bags for 3-4 years now. So yeah, you might not have fancy equipment like that. But what we do have is round items in the house somewhere. So what we can do, and we're rounding the bottom edge, okay? So I'm going to turn this upside down so I can draw on it. Need a pen. So double check, this is the bottom edge. So I'm going to draw on both those two edges. Now, you can grab anything that is round, okay? Anything that is round around the house can help you make the rounded corner. I wouldn't mind a bigger rounded corner, and we all know I love double-sided tapes, painter's tape, so I'm going to use painter's tape. I'm going to have the painter's tape right along the edge there. I hope you guys can see this well, so that it's touching that edge, touching that edge. There's a beautiful curve there. And I'm just going to draw that curve down on that one edge. There we go. Got a beautiful corner, just like that, okay? And then I am going to cut that corner. So you really can just do it yourself easily with any item you like. If you are going to be mass producing this bag and you will continuously use that tape of painter's tape, then I probably recommend not using that as the bias, as the base, because obviously that will get smaller every time you use it. But you can do it literally with anything. You can do it with a thread cone, you can do it with a glue stick, you can do it with a water bottle. So it really just depends on the size of the circle and the curve that you wanted to work with. Okay, it's really that simple. Okay, so now that you've drawn and cut one edge, I could just come in and do that, but that's not accurate. Okay, it might not be accurate. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to fold it across just like that, and then use that first side to measure my second side. If you want to call me a genius, now's the time to do it. I'm joking. No, please don't. Okay, and then you can cut that as well. And then now what you should have is two perfectly matching curved corners, just like that. And then after you've done the one piece, you're going to also, of course, bring it across and do it to the other piece as well. And get that all cut and drawn. Probably use a different color pen. That was not a great color pen option. Turned my light on so I can see it. I don't like having the light on when I'm filming you guys because it changes the color saturation and anyway, stuff. But it helps me see this horrible orange line that I've drawn on a dark navy blue fabric because Sam, after calling herself a genius, did something silly like that. Anyway, okay, so now that that's drawn, we have matching curves. We are going to keep moving on. So if you are doing a stabilizer, now's the time to adhere it. So make sure you adhere to the wrong side of your external piece, your external flat piece, the stabilizer. Again, I'm not doing stabilizer because I am cheating. No, not cheating. It's just not what I'm doing. Okay. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to find the center points top and bottom on my exterior piece. Ooh. I'm going to clean that up too. Okay, so now that we've done that, we are going to get the lining piece. We're going to find the wrong side. So this is the wrong side. This is the right side of the fabric. This is the wrong side. Along the wrong side, we are going to... Hey, I didn't do the centers of this. I thought I did. Okay, find the centers. Okay, there you go. And then, now that we've found the centers, on the wrong side of the fabric, we are going to mark a spot along the center, and there's a measurement up from the base. So I'm going to quickly do that off camera, just so I don't give the measurements away and bring a camera into frame. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, doke. So I've just marked it there. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but there's a cross right there. So it's a marking up from the base and right along the center. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our magnetic snaps. So right now we are working with the male section of it, the male part. So if you don't know magnetic snaps, you've never worked with them before, the female is the one that has the indent and the male is the one that has the pokey out bit. Okay, so we're working with the male, so the pokey out bit. Now, first what we're going to do is we're going to adhere our scrap stabilizer. Oh, sorry. We're going to adhere our scrap stabilizer and we're going to completely cover that marking that we made, okay? So I am going to head over to to my iron and I'm actually going to fuse this on. I changed my mind. I said before I'm going to use a Suffusive Foam scrap. I don't have the right size scrap for it. So I changed my mind and I'm using a fusible buckram. So I just have to quickly fuse that on. So give me 2 seconds and I'll come straight back. Okie dokie. So I've just adhered that. I've redrawn that to make it a bit clearer for you guys, just so you guys can actually see that line. So now what we're going to do is we are going to attach our magnetic snap. If you haven't done it before, this is where the washer comes out super duper 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 helpful. So we're going to grab the washer. We're going to line the circle, which is the center of the magnetic snap, right up with the spot that you've marked as the center point, or where you're supposed to put the magnetic snap. You're going to draw and mark there. So that's where you want to slit your fabric open. Okay, you're going to grab your seam ripper, go in one side, and this is the tricky bit, is don't over seam rip, okay? Just go right down to that line where you did the other side as well. So just seam rip literally the line that you just drew. Go. And then you should be able to, on the right side, insert your magnetic snap. Just like that. That's perfect. And then your washer goes in. And then you flatten the edge. Now it is quite contested which way you flatten your prongs, if you are using a pronged one and not a rivet one. I believe there are rivet magnetic snaps now. To me, it just depends on my mood of the day. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Okay, now, after you've done that, you can adhere another piece of stabilizer on top. That is what Cindy does. I cheat. Like I said, I love painter's tape. So I grab some painter's tape and I stick over that. Now, the reason why you are doing this, like painter's tape or a bit of stabilizer, is it protects your other piece of fabric from rubbing up against these metal prongs and getting damaged, okay? So that's why we're doing that. Okie dokie. So there we go. So that's your magnetic snap installed. Okie dokie. So now that you've got your magnetic snap installed, we're going to match your lining right sides together with your external flap piece. We're going to clip it all together, and then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew it all together. So now we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, ignoring the top. And then we'll come back over. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Okay, follow me over. Okie dokie. So we're going to sew the flap with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, I like to have a smaller seam as I like to use a shorter stitch length on this, especially around the corners. Just take your time. You want to make sure your curves are still just nice and smooth, okay? Okie dokie, so that's just been sewn together. So this is what we're looking at now. So what we're going to do next is we are going to trim these corners here. We're going to trim the top. We're going to birth it and top stitch. So Cindy has it to trim the top after you've birthed it. I actually like to trim it before. Just for me, it's a little bit easier. I'm a little bit lazy like that. So I'm going to quickly trim that top off. So it just helps give it a better fit, and also to clean up that edge, just makes it a bit cleaner and neater. So give me 2 seconds. Okie dokie, so I've just trimmed that top edge. So see how now it's perfectly level and flat and beautiful. Now, before we open it up, I am going to use some pinking shears just to cut around this curve here. So depending on how tight your curve is that you've cut, this helps make your fabric lie a bit flatter. Now, like I said, I know this is a beginner pattern, so some of us might not have pinking shears. So what do you do if you don't have pinking shears? If you do not have pinking shears, you can just use normal scissors and just cut little notches. They don't have to be perfect. It just needs to be some notches all the way along that curve. That just helps when you turn the flap right sides out for it to, I guess, turn better, be a bit smoother. Making sure, I don't know how well you guys saw how close I came to cutting that thread there. Making sure you're not cutting your threads. Yeah, I didn't. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay, there we go. So And then we are going to turn it right side out. And here's a little tip for those of us who might be using vinyl, okay? If you are using vinyl and it is necessary, just got some threads here, you can use a, what's it called? A hairdryer to quickly give it a little blast of warmth, and that will help make the vinyl faux leather a little bit more pliable, okay? So I'm just using my finger. It's just in there giving those corners a nice little push out because I want to get that beautiful, nice rounded edge. And then I'm just flattening the seams to give myself a nice, beautiful finish there, okay? There we go. So once we're happy with that and we flatten the seam and it all feels beautiful, we're going to bring the sewing machine back in, and then we are going to top stitch around the whole perimeter. So you don't have to sew this bit shut, like the open edge. I like to do it. It just makes it a bit easier for me. Yep, and we are going to top stitch. Now, the trickiest part when you're top stitching is this part here. Your magnetic snap is right there, right? So when you are top stitching, depending on the size of foot you've got, you might find that your top stitching gets, your sewing foot gets in the way of the magnetic snap. So I won't notice as much, A, because I'm working with vinyl, so it's a lot thicker. B, because I think I've got more than enough space. If you, let's bring this in so I can show you guys. I installed that magnetic snap exactly as per the instructions. And if you look there, like I've got plenty of space there. So I should be all good. Okay, so let's get this sewn on. Yeah, bring you in. Actually, I might put you guys on pause for a quick second because I just want to change my top thread color. I'll be 2 seconds. Okie dokie. I've just changed the threads, so we're going to top stitch now. Now, I am going to use a 1/8 seam allowance, roughly, slightly less. If you need to go less because of the magnetic snap, do feel free to do it as close to the edge as you would like / need. And you might need the hump jumper if, like me, you are doing vinyl, just because of how thick that starting point is. And with top stitch, I like to do a nice long stitch length, okay? Here we go. So we can end it at the top stitch here. I just like to come back across and close that open edge off with a basting stitch. And that also helps me tie up my loose threads from the start too. There we go. Okie dokie. So that's your flap. So let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep moving on. Okie dokie. Now that we finished the flap, we're going to attach it to our exterior pieces. So choose which one is going to be your back, if there is a front and back. Oh, I don't know. Oh, I don't know. This is going to be the back of my bag. Yeah. Okay. So put the front piece away. Keep your back. If you haven't already, mark the center top edge of your flap, so the raw edge, just like that. And then you're going to have it exterior facing exterior, center to center, and clip that in place. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we'll get that sewn down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay? So follow me over to the sewing machine. We'll get that sewn down, okay? Again, this is your back. If it does matter which one is your front or back, this is your back panel, and it is the exterior, so the side facing out to the exterior, okay? Let's head over. Okie dokie. So we're just going to get this flap. It's sewn down, but it's really just, we're just basting it down really, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so if you need a hump jumper, make sure you have it on the ready. And we're just kind of basting slash sewing the flap down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okie dokie, so that's the flap sewn down, and that's all done with that. So let's keep moving back over to the overhead and keep going. And now we're going to finish off the magnetic snap. So we need to grab the other part of the magnetic snap that we didn't use. So the female part, oops, female part in the washer. And first of all, we're going to measure where we're going to place it. So from the center, we're going to find the center along that way. And we're measuring up from here, okay? So we're measuring up from the slip pocket up. And as you can see, I've already marked off camera. It's just a mark right there. Can you see that? Yep, you can. Okay, and like what we did with the other snap, the snap on the flap, the other one, that one, we are going to draw where we're going to mark it. So again, center your dot inside the washer and draw those 2 lines on either side for your prong markings. Attach your scrap stabilizer to the back. Actually, no need to attach scrap stabilizer because you guys have fusible fleece on the inside. I don't, so I'm going to attach some scrap stabilizer. I'm poking a little hole there, and that is just to help me identify where my stabilizer needs to go. Okay, so because you guys did the fusible fleece stabilizer, you guys don't need to add a scrap stabilizer like I do on this part, because you already have fleece, which is a stabilizer that will stop it from ripping or doing silly things that we don't want it to do. Okay, and like we did before, grab your seam ripper and rip the 2 prong marks, making sure not to go too far. And if, like me, it is close to where your quilting is, don't cut your threads. Do not accidentally rip your amazing, gorgeous quilt work. There we go. Slide it straight in. Washer on the back. And once again, a little bit of painter's tape just to protect everything. There we go. And that is your female side installed. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on. So let's bring back both of those exterior pieces. So there we have them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to match them right sides together. Okay, I am just, you know how I left all of those loose threads from my quilting. I'm just making sure they're out of the way so they won't be stuck in the seams. Okay, so we're matching them right sides together. I like to match the bottom before I match the sides. They should match up perfectly because it is exactly the same size, right? Okay, and we're going to clip along both of the sides and the bottom. There we go. So now that we're clipped, what we're going to do is going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew both of these sides and the bottom together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. After that, we're going to box the corners, okay? But we'll do this first and then we'll box the corners, okay? So follow me over. Okay, so we're sewing this all together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So just there we go. So just on both of the edges, both of the side edges and then the bottom edge. I'm purposely leaving all of my threads loose like that because I want them to be caught in this sew to hold them all together. Okay, so there is reason to my madness. Okay, and then now the bottom. Okay, and then the last side. There we go. So that's all done. So next we're going to do the boxed corners. I might bring us back over to the overhead to show us that before we keep moving on. Okay, so follow me to the overhead. So we're back at the overhead. So we've just sewn the external. We've done all the sides there. We've done the bottom. So now what we're going to do is boxing these corners. So if you've never boxed corners before, it's super simple. So this is the bottom. This is the side. We're going to pull the two fabrics away from each other. Like that. We're going to match the seams together and open them up, and then we'll form a lovely, and just match up those edges just like that. See how that just matches up? And clip it in place. And that is how you box, do a box bottom. Just like that. Okay, and we're doing that on the other side as well. So again, open it up, match those seams to seam, and get those seams flat. Like open the seams up to flatten them, and clip it in place, just like that. Okie doke. And now what we're going to do is we're going to head back over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew both of these boxed bottoms with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're going to head back over there and we're just going to sew that up. Okay, so follow me back. Okie dokie. So box corner, so 1/4 inch seam allowance, starting over there, and we're just making sure that everything is still clipped together as we go. Okie dokie. And then the other sides. Go. Awesome. Okie dokie. That's all done. Let's head back over to the overhead. So we've boxed those corners. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it right side out, just so we can have a check of it, make sure we're happy with it all. So just turn around. Turn it around? It's not turning it around, we're birthing it. Okay. So just bring it up. One of the things I like to check is, first of all, my boxed corner, my boxed bottom. Just like to double check that my seams match, which they do. I have loose threads everywhere, which is expected. Okay, on this side as well. It is, it's beautiful, it's perfect. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to check is our flap. We're making sure our flap is closing and matching up with our magnetic snap, and it does. It closes beautifully. It's perfect. I am happy. Yay. Okay, so next step, what we're going to do is we are going to organize our D-rings. Okay, so let's put this aside and we'll start working on the D-rings. Okay, moving on to the D-rings. So grab your 2 pieces of D-ring tabs. What we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to fold it in half. If they are directional, it's the sides to match up. So if it is directional, this is the top, bottom, and left and right. Okay, so it's like that. After you've done that, you're going to fold either of these sides into that center point there too, and then bring that one in as well to meet in the center, and then we're going to fold in half again and clip that together. Okay, so just a reminder, if it is directional, this is the wrong side. Okay, so I am folding in towards the wrong side. If it is directional, your left is going to your right, or your right is going to your left. First find the center, leave a crease, then fold either of those side edges into the center. If you would like to use double-sided tape, you can use double-sided tape to help hold it all together. Like I've said a few times now, I don't like using double-sided tape because my sewing machine doesn't like double-sided tape, okay? You can also iron it to help hold it. I'm too lazy for that, not gonna lie, too lazy for that. Okay, so now that we've clipped them in place, what we're gonna do is we're gonna head over to the sewing machine. We're going to top stitch on either of those long edges. So on that edge and that edge, that edge and that edge. And then after we do that, we're going to insert our D-ring. You're going to insert your D-ring, fold the short edges to meet, and then you're going to sew a line as close to the D-ring as you can. And then I'm also going to baste the base because I like to baste the base. Okay, so follow me over. We'll get it top stitched and I'll show you the rest. Okie dokie, so let's get these stitched shut. I like to start on the edge that has the opening so that it is sewn shut as early as possible. And we're doing both of the long edges. Okay, once we've top stitched both of those long edges, we're going to grab the D-ring, slide the D-ring in, bring the short edges to match, and then we're going to sew as closely to the D-ring as we can. So for me, normally I like to sew this way, right? With the seam allowance and everything, but I'm going to sew this way because this side of my sewing foot is tighter than the other side. So I'm going to do it on this side. I'm going to bring it to, probably should have said this earlier, but a good tip for doing this part is to again match your thread color as closely to your fabric as possible, because let me just show you now. So I've just sewn that down. There we go. And I'll bring you guys nice and close. Try and focus in on that. See how it's not super obvious with the stitch lines or anything, like it's just nice and easy. I just need to trim off the extra little threads and we have a beautiful little D-ring tab. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the second piece now, okay? Okie dokie, so those are the D-ring tabs done. So let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep moving on. Okay, so now that our D-rings are done, we're going to bring our bag back in. Go. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark an inch from the raw edge of these. Just helps me work out an overhang, how much of an overhang I want, okay? Okay, I can't find my fabric safe pen, so I'm using a normal pen, and I'm just literally drawing. My rule is 1 inch wide, so I'm literally just drawing 1 inch along there. It doesn't matter that it's a normal pen because, truth be told, this will be hidden under the seam allowance. Okie dokie, there we go. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're grabbing our D-ring tab. We're matching the D-ring tab, that overhang line, to the edge of the top edge of the bag. D-ring facing down, just like that. I'm just going to clip it right here. And then it's roughly centered on that seam, okay? So, and then I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Okay, just like that. There we go. And then we're going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste this on, okay? It's not necessary. You don't have to baste it on, but I like to baste it on because, truth be told, if I don't baste it, I am going to forget it even existed. So let me quickly baste it on. You guys don't need to watch me do that. So I'll baste that on and then we will move straight into the lining segment, okay? So let's keep going. Okie dokie. We're moving on to the inside of the bag. So we're going to grab our pocket pieces. So it should be 4 pocket pieces. If you are separating them, if they're different, we're going to put 2 aside for the zipper pocket and 2 aside for the slip pocket. Okay, now main linings, if you need to interface it now. I don't need to interface, so I'm good. One piece is good to be left exactly how it is. The other piece, what we're going to do is cut it into 2 pieces from the top. There is a measurement as to how much to cut it by, so I've already done that. So that's the top, that's the bottom. Okay, now we're going to move straight on to creating the lining slip pocket. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to find the centers. I'm going to get the centers of the top and bottom of both of the pieces of the inside lining. It's just something I like to do. For me, I find it easier then to make sure everything matches up later on. So I'm just going to quickly match that, find those. Okay, we're going to grab one of the pocket pieces that we're working with for the slip pocket. We're going to find the center of that one as well. We're going to match it right sides together with the bottom part of the lining. Okay, so the bigger one, center to center, just like that. Okay, so once we've matched it up, we're going to draw a box. I've just done that quickly as well without showing you guys the camera. And so what we're doing is we're measuring. The measurement is in the instructions, but the measurement is from this edge of the pocket in, this edge of the pocket in, and from the top down, okay? And you're drawing that box straight onto the lining. This is the wrong side of the lining, remember? We're right sides together. Okay, and what we're going to do is we are going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew on that line that we did. So it's an open rectangle. So you're doing that short edge, the long edge, the short, leaving this completely open and untouched. And then we're going to cut it open and stuff. But let's go over, let's get this sewn down first, and then I'll come back and we'll explain the next steps moving forward. Okay, so follow me over. Okie dokie, so we're going to get this box sewn down. Now, Cindy has on here to use a small stitch length. She's got, like I said, I don't understand stitch lengths, 2 to 2.5, okay? So if your machine has stitch lengths, that's what it is. And we're sewing along those lines that we drew, okay? Okie dokie. There we go. So after we've sewn that together, move the sewing machine out of the way to give us some more space. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut inside the rectangle that we just, well, not really a rectangle, open rectangle that we just sewed. So just around here. So it doesn't have to be precise. She's got on there about a 1/4 inch. Like leave about a 1/4, that is not a 1/4 inch. I am not good with guesstimating, but roughly around a 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be precise, something along there, okay? So again, here's my stitches here, and it goes around, and I'm gonna cut roughly around there, okay? So nowhere near my stitches. I'm leaving quite a good little seam allowance, and I'm just cutting it. Okie dokie. So now that we've cut it, you should have something that looks like that. Now, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut from that corner to the edge of your stitches. So you don't have to draw it. I'm drawing this to make it easy for you guys to see, okay? So something like that, okay? Now I'm just going to check. I might actually cut from this side, to be honest, because I can see my thread's a bit clearer, because I don't know how well you guys can see, but the threads on this side are quite hard to see, whereas on this side it's super clear. Because what I want to do is I want to cut from the corner to the corner of my stitches as close as I can without touching my stitches. Do not cut the stitches, okay? That's your biggest thing. Do not cut the stitches. There we go. And then once we've done that, we are going to flip the fabric or the pocket, right sides out. So just the other way around, and we are going to seam press along the seam to give it a nice, beautiful finish. There we go. So this is what we should have, a beautiful rectangle like that. I've just seam pressed it to get it nice and crisp. I'm working with Sophisticated Twill and Vibrant Vu, and both of these fabrics hold their shape really well, which is why I can just finger press. But if you are using something that needs a little bit more help to get to the shape, like cotton woven, definitely take it to the iron and give it a nice little press, okay? So this is what the front will look like, and this is what the back will look like, okay? Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch around that section, and that will help hold all the fabric down, okay? So I'll bring the sewing machine back in, and we'll get to top stitching. Okay, so we are top stitching. I like to top stitch with about a 1/8 seam allowance. To me, it's just what length you can hold and make a beautiful stitch, to be honest. Okie dokie. So now we should have a beautiful top stitch just like this. I'll take us back over to the overhead. I think that'll make it easier to continue doing this. Okay, so follow me over. Okay, so this is what we're working with for the lining with the slip pocket. We've just top stitched that down. This is what the back looks like. This is what the front looks like. So we're going to turn it back around to the back. We're going to grab another piece of the pocket, and we're going to match it pocket to pocket, right sides together. Okay, there we go. Now we're just going to clip along the short edges, match those short edges together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mark 2 spots down the bottom there. So this is just a birthing gap that you're leaving open, okay? You don't have to measure it. You can see how I'm just roughly drawing a line, roughly where I want it to be, okay? Now, how big this birthing gap is, if you can see the photo that Cindy's done, hers obviously looks like comes in a lot more than what mine is. Have a think about your exterior material, okay? So my exterior material is faux leather. So ideally, a bigger gap, the better to birth, okay? So that's why I've left it, you know, pretty big. But if you are working with something that's super easy to manipulate, can get down super small, you can do a smaller birthing gap, but I don't recommend it. I hate birthing, so let's go a bigger gap. Bigger gap, the bigger, the better. Okay, so this is where my birthing gap's going to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew the short edges and down the bottom until you reach your birthing gap. Miss the birthing gap, sew again, and along the other short edge, okay? Of course, making sure you are not sewing your top fabric. Do not sew this bit. You're just sewing the pocket, and you're maneuvering the fabric out of the way as you sew. Okay, so let's head over there and let's get that sewn together, making sure you are leaving a birthing gap. Okay, so follow me over. Okie dokie, so we're at the sewing machine. So we're going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, the 2 lining pockets. So you can sew it this way, so that the side that you drew on was up, and you just keep folding the exterior out of the way. Ideally, I like to do it exterior up and fold it, because then I can see my exterior a bit better, which means I've drawn where my birthing gap is on the wrong side, but that's fine. Like I said, the birthing gap isn't a measured measurement. Does that make sense? A measured measurement. So it doesn't matter if it's not precisely 2 inches wide or 3 inches wide or whatever it is, okay? You just need to make sure that you do one. Okie dokie. Making sure when you do that birthing gap section where you end it, reverse stitch. Make sure you do reverse stitch to make it easier. Not easier, but to make sure that your stitches don't break easily. Okay. Okie dokie, there we go. So that's all sewn together. Let me just move this out of the way. Oh, sorry, knocking you guys a little bit. Okay, here we go. So that's our pocket sewn together. It's a bit tricky to see, but I've left a birthing gap here and the top is unsewn, but the rest is all sewed up just like that. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to, where your birthing gap is at the bottom here, we're just going to give that a little fold open and a little press. Oh, can we see it? Maybe I need to do it this way. Here we go. So that's where my stitches are, my sewing is. So I'm just using that to measure out and have that flattened. And I'm going to do it on the other side too. And what this will do is when it comes time to birth, it'll make it easier to close your birthing gap up afterwards, okay? Cindy has here to go over to the sewing, to the iron and give it a quick little press. I'm not going to go to the iron. One, because I am lazy and I can't be bothered to turn my iron back on. And B, because like I've said before, I'm working with Vibrant Voo and it is a fabric that just likes to hold shape. So it really isn't something I need to do, to be honest. Okay, so just give it a nice press. Okie dokie. Once you've gotten that edge nice and crisp, we'll keep moving on. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this fabric back right side around. So your main lining is facing the right way up. You're going to grab the top half. It's not even the top half, the top little bit that you cut off. You're going to match it right sides together to the pocket. Now I like to just quickly find the center again. So you are matching it center to center. For me, it just makes it easier to help line everything back up nicely. So right sides together, center to center. We'll get that all clipped into place. Go. And then we're going to bring the sewing machine back over. We're going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. After it's sewn together, we're going to open it up and we're going to top stitch it with the seam pressed towards the top. Okay, so let's bring the sewing machine over and let's get that sewn on. I'm surprised no one's asked me this before. Why do I have a crowbar sitting on my sewing machine? For those of you who don't know, I sew with a vintage sewing machine, obviously. And it is a knee lever machine. So you know how most sewing machines use a foot pedal? Mine uses a knee lever. So that is my version of a foot pedal. It attaches onto a hole in my sewing machine and that's what controls it. Okay, so 1/4 inch along that top that we just attached. Just be very careful as you go whether your height difference here where the pockets are requires a hump jumper, okay? So just bear that in mind and yeah, if you do, use your hump jumper. Okie dokie. Now that that's all sewn together, we are again going to, like I said, open that seam up and then we're going to top stitch along the top edge. I don't need too much space. So I'm just opening it up. There's my seam there and I'm just flattening it. So I've got a beautiful straight line to top stitch on. There we go. And we're top stitching along the top. Okay, so we're not top stitching down here, we're top stitching up here. Okay, so sewing machine back in. Okay, and top stitch. So top stitch is with a 1/8 seam allowance. And there we go. That is the slip pocket done. I'll head over to the top to give you a better look at it and then we'll move on to the zipper pocket. Okie dokie, so there you go. That's your slip pocket side of your lining. So as you can see, there's my little slip pocket there. There is a big birthing gap in there, hence why you can see my table. And this is really cute. I love that. Okay, now we're going to grab your second lining piece, okay? Because we're going to do the zipper pocket next. Now bring it across and you will notice that your one with the slip pocket, even though they were the same size before, is now slightly shorter than the piece that you originally cut. Kind of wish I did two different colors now so you guys could see, but then the bag would look hideous. But it roughly comes down to here, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly trim it so that both lining pieces are now the same height again. This is height, okay? So this goes this way. I've just turned it that way to make it easier for me. We're going to trim it so that they're the same height, and then we are going to move on to the zipper pocket. So I've marked where I need to trim so I can get rid of the slip pocket part. Goodbye. And I'm going to quickly grab my rotary ruler, my rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm just going to trim that a little bit off. Okay, so I'll be 2 seconds. Actually, before I run away, quick tip. Because this was a perfect square, was it a perfect square? I think so. I am actually going to quickly mark so I don't forget what is what, okay? Okay, so on the wrong side, I've just put a T on the top corner. Okay, I'm going to trim that and come straight back. Okie dokie. So that's been trimmed. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our pocket piece in, zipper pocket piece in. So there should be 2 pieces. I only need one at the moment, so I've just grabbed one in. On the wrong side of it, I'm going to draw a box, okay? The measurement for the box is in the instructions. It is centered and down from the top, okay? And I've drawn that box right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to match this. This is drawn on the wrong side, in case I didn't say that. I think I did. We're going to marry that up to the top of this. Well, not to the top, but we're going to pin it in place with this piece. Now, I like to have the centers cut out. Again, it's just, for me, it just makes everything easier to work out. So let me just quickly find those centers. There we go. And then we're going to, there is a measurement in the pattern that tells you where this matches up from the top here, center to center, and you're going to match it up. Okay, now Cindy uses pins. Pins? That's what they're called. Pins to pin these in place. I don't own pins. In case it's not a dead giveaway, I'm extremely clumsy. Pins don't work for me. It is a disaster waiting to happen. So I use painter's tape. So I'm going to quickly grab my ruler. I'm going to measure up where this is supposed to sit. And then I'm going to stick painter's tape on the short edges to hold it in place to where it is supposed to be. And I'll bring you guys back in. Now, big tip. If, unlike me, you are not filming a tutorial and you can bring rulers onto your screen, I like to bring my quilting ruler up now and just have my quilting ruler literally put on there on that measurement, and then this will be perfectly straight and flat and level and measure up easily. That's how I normally do it if I wasn't filming a tutorial, okay? But alas, I can't. So I'm going to quickly do it and then bring you guys back in to frame. Okie dokie, so I've measured it up and that's where it's supposed to be. I took the ruler away before I brought you guys back in. I said I was going to sticky tape the sides, but when I had the ruler there, made it easier to tape the bottom. So that's what I've done. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew that rectangle, okay? So literally sewing on the lines that we drew on that rectangle. After we do that, we are going to cut it open. Now, this is something that you can do if you'd like to right now, and that is to draw little V's on the edge here, okay? And if you wanted to, you can also match that up with... Don't draw like that. Do it as a straight line. Don't draw like me, okay? And what that is that's the lines that you're going to cut later on. But right now, we're going to sew this down all along the outside beautiful rectangle that I drew. And then we're going to cut it open, birth it, and then attach the zipper tape. But I'll talk you through it as we go. So follow me over to the sewing machine. Okie dokie. So first of all, I'm just reducing my stitch length, and then we'll bring this in and we're going to sew along that beautiful rectangle that we drew. Now I am slowly inserting my needle because I want it to be perfectly in the corner of my stitch lines. There we go. Okay, and we're just going to sew all the way around that rectangle. Sorry if you guys saw my head. I was just leaning in to make sure my stitches were all in the right spot. Okay, so that's all been sewn together now. So I'm going to quickly snip this off, move the sewing machine to bring you guys in a little bit better. Okay, so this is where we're at. We've sewn around the rectangle. It's easier to see on this side. As you can see, it's a beautiful rectangle. What we're going to do now is we're going to cut right down that center. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. So if you'd like to, you can grab your seam ripper, poke a hole and rip. Okay, that is probably one of the easier ways to do it. If you don't have a seam ripper readily handle, whatever. If you don't have a seam ripper easy to reach because you don't believe in the seam ripper curse, like I do, then you can just fold it in half, little cut with your scissors so that you cause a little hole. Okay, and then with that you can then cut all the way along in the center of that box until you reach the V if you did draw a V. Now the biggest thing with this part is, and the trickiest part is, you want to cut as close to the corner without snipping any threads. So that's the trickiest part of doing zipper boxes, okay? I don't know how well you guys can see. I'm trying to sneak my own head in there so I can see better too. There we go. The closer you can get without snipping your threads, the cleaner your corner looks, okay? There we go. Okay, now that we've cut that, I'm going to take my painter's tape off and we are going to turn the pocket right side out. Now, before I turn it, I like to give my seams a little press. That just helps my fabric find, maybe not find, but it helps my fabric realize what I'm wanting it to do. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just giving it a quick little press. I'm doing that on the seam side as well of the lining. Go. Okay. After we've given it a nice little press, we'll just bird the pocket. So we're just putting the pocket straight through the hole that we cut. And then seam press. Or finger press those seams. Go, and a nice little press. Now if you wanted to give it an iron, you can, but there you go, that's your zipper pocket. So that's on the lining side and this is the wrong side, okay, which is your pocket side, of course. So that's what it looks like. Okay, now moving on, we are grabbing your zipper tape, and if you haven't done it yet, make sure you singe the ends of your zipper tape. It's just good housekeeping. I don't know why I keep trying the lighters. All my lighters are dying lately. Okie dokie. And if you need to insert your zipper pull, make sure you get that on. Okie dokie. Now, we are going to sew the zipper tape or into the zipper box, okay? Now, a lot of people use double-sided tape to get it on. So if you were wanting to do that, what we want to do is we're going to put some double-sided tape along both of those edges. And then once we've done that, you would then line it up to your pocket and you would stick it down, making sure you've centered it and then you're sticking it down. And what that will do is it'll hold your zipper properly, perfectly in place for you to sew. I am not using double-sided tape. A, because my sewing machine hates double-sided tape. B, because double-sided tape costs a lot of money here in Australia, truth be told. So I don't want to use double-sided tape, and I have learned how to sew it without double-sided tape. So that's what I'm doing. But please, if you have never done zippers before, use double-sided tape. Please, please, please use double-sided tape. It will make this much easier. Okay, so like I said, we're going to center the zipper to the pocket, and then we're going to sew it down. Okay, so we're sewing it with I guess with a 1/8 seam allowance, we would say. So we are going to sew the zipper tape on. Now I normally do about a 1/8 inch from the edge, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, here we go. So bring that in, lie that flat. I'm centering it. It would not, your lineup shouldn't be this tricky as mine is, because remembering I am not using double-sided tape. If you used double-sided tape, your zipper tape would have been stuck down, and you are not fiddling around like I am right now. You are literally just going straight into sewing with your 1/8 seam allowance. There we go. So that's all sewn together. Now you would have seen that I've left long ends because I don't backstitch on my zipper boxes. I like to pull my threads in through the back and tie it off. So that's just a way where you can lock off your threads without having to backstitch. So it just looks a little bit cleaner. Okay, so okie dokie. So that's top stitch and sewn on. I'm just going to move the sewing machine out of the way to give us a little bit more space again. Okie dokie. So this is what we're looking at on the back. This is the front. Now obviously you do not have a pocket right now. If you open it up, it is nothing. So you're going to grab your last piece of pocket lining. Ta-da! Now before I move on, if you have a long zipper like mine, and there's a lot of excess, I like to trim it off. Now, I like to trim it off so that it's actually within the zipper box, so I don't have to sew over it when I do the other fabric. Obviously, making sure you don't actually cut it past the line. You shouldn't be able to, like you're sewing, but anyway, it's worth mentioning. You never know, you never know. Now, whenever you cut zipper tape, you are going to singe it. It is good housekeeping. So quickly give that a singe to melt it off so that it won't fray. There we go. And now what we're going to do is you're going to grab your other piece of fabric, your last piece of zipper pocket. You're going to match it right sides together to the light. So this is the right side of the pocket piece. This is the right side of the pocket piece. We're matching them right sides together. And then we're going to clip that in place so that we can sew it all together. So we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and like we've done before, we're going to have it lining side up, and we're going to sew it this way around. Okay, so you can move your lining out of the way as you go to sew that zipper pocket closed. We're going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so let's move the sewing machine back in and let's keep going. Here we go. So we are doing this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure you are getting that lining completely out of the way so that it doesn't get caught up and sewn down. Okie dokie, that's our zipper pocket all done. Now we'll head back over to the overhead before we keep moving on, because next we'll be sorting out the assembly of the bottom of the lining. Okay, anyway, so let's head back over to the overhead and I will talk you through what we're doing next. Now we have both our linings done, so we're going to do exactly like what we did on the exterior with the box corners. So we're going to go and we're going to measure and cut out the 2 corners squares on both the zippered lining zipper pocket lining piece and the slip pocket lining piece. So I'll quickly cut them out and come back to you. Okie dokie, so that's both been cut. I've cut those 2 box corners. So like we did with the exterior, what we're going to do now is match up the linings, the sides and the bottom, and we're going to clip the sides and the bottom in place. Okie dokie. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sew the bottom together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now the sides, we're going to do something a little bit trickier, okay? The sides, we're going to start from the top with a 1/4 inch and it's going to slowly get wider until it's 3/4 inches right down the bottom. So what I suggest and what Cindy has suggested is to draw a sew line, okay? So the easiest way to do it with something like this, the easiest thing to do is to mark sew lines, okay? So what I've done is I've marked, you can't really see it, but 1/4 from the edge in there, done that on the same side, and on the bottom I've marked 3/4 inches in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring a ruler in if you can. I can't, so I'm bringing fabric in. And I'm going to line up my 3/4 and my 1/4. Sorry if you see my head. And then I am just going to draw a sew line, just like that. So what that will do is it gives me a perfect line to follow for the gradually increasing seam allowance. Just going to do the other side quickly as well. Beautiful. Okie doke. So there we go. So we're going to sew along those 2 sew lines on the side, and the bottom we're sewing together with a 1/4 inch. If you want to draw a sew line, you can as well. And then after that, we are going to do the box corners, just like we did on the exterior, but I will show you over at the sewing machine. So follow me over. Okie dokie. So I'm going to start with the bottom because the bottom's the easy one where it's just a 1/4 inch all the way in a straight line. So let's do that one first. Okay, and then we are going to do the sides. So remember the top is a 1/4 inch and then we are slowly going out until we reach 3/4 inch. There we go. And then on the other side, because I've drawn on this side, I'm starting from the 3/4 inch and sewing up to 1/4 inch. That's why sew lines are great. There we go. That's all done. Now, just like we did on the exterior, we're going to do the box bottom. So I like to, let's move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, so bottom side, open that up, match the side seam to the bottom seam, and then open that seam flat. There we go. And open the seam flat and clip that together. Maybe I should move the sewing machine a bit more. Let me move the sewing machine a bit more. Okay, okay. There we go. So we opened that up so the seam is flat, matching seam to seam. There we go. And then we're doing the other side as well. Okay. And again, match your seam to seam. Your thingy to thingy. I can English. Now, you will find, like, as you can see, they don't match up properly. They don't match up perfectly. That is because, obviously, one seam was done at 1/4 inch. One seam at the end there is almost 3/4 inch. So there is a difference in the seam. That is fine because this is the lining. So your box corners don't have to be absolutely perfectly beautiful. So I'm just kind of clipping it just so it's held in place because it will be within the seam allowance, okay? That's the main thing. It will be within the seam allowance. I might add a couple more clips here to this one too, just to make it a bit easier to deal with. The main thing is your seam is matched to your seam and clip, okay? And then we are going to sew this together with a 3/8 seam allowance, okay, on both those box corners. So let's bring her back in. I lost one of my clippies. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, so, and we are doing this with a 3/8 seam allowance. There we go. And then the other side. There we go. That's all done. And before we head up the overhead, we're just going to double check that I caught all the seams, which I did. You can have a quick little look and turn it inside out to look at the bottom as well. Like just poke out those little seams. See how the seams still line up and it's beautiful. So that's how you know you are all good. There we go. Okay. So let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep moving on. Okie dokie, so now we're up to final assembly. So that's your lining and let's grab your exterior as well. I cheekily added stabilizer in, like I said before, mine is it's a fusible foam, so I can just stick it in after construction. Reason being is, if anyone's watched any of my videos before, you will know that I do not like floppy bags. I thought I would be okay with a floppy bag. I'm not. I need and I love the structure. So that works. But you guys saw what it looked like before. It didn't need it if you didn't want it, okay? So it's still super beginner friendly, super easy to do. But for myself, I just like a bit of structure, okay? Okay, anyway, so what we're going to do now is we're grabbing our liner and we're going to put our exterior inside the liner. Exterior is right side out. The lining is wrong side out, okay? Now, this part is the part that we have to be careful of. What is facing where? So the flap, the part with the flap, that is the back side of your bag, okay? Oh, one quick thing. Stick those handles into the pockets, okay? So that will make it harder to accidentally get caught while you do the final stitching, okay? So slide them into the pockets to get them out of the way. That's a little tip for you there. And you have to decide on the inside of the bag which side what you want on the back and what you want on the front. For me, I always like to have the zipper pocket on the back of the bag. So I'm going to have the side with the flap in against the side with the zipper pocket, okay? But there is no right or wrong answer, okay? So it is up to you how you want your bag. So I'm just going to slide that in. It is going to be a tight squeeze. That is normal. We want that. Okay, and so we're just sliding it in to the bag. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to match the side seams. Clip that in place. Actually, bring more of these clips over, huh? That would make this easier. And get the rest of the bag in there. Again, I am making this look trickier than it is because of having to make way for the camera. This is not tricky at all, sliding your bag into place, okay? It is a me thing, okay? And then if you marked the centers, you can match your center points. And then we're just clipping that top edge the lining and the exterior together, right sides together, and we're just clipping it together. That's all we're doing, really. It's super easy. And the only reason this is taking me a little bit more time is because I'm pulling all the threads through, like how I did on the sides. I'm just getting all the threads through so they're out of the way. Making sure if your webbing came out like mine did, while we were doing that, I was stuffing it in and it came out of the slip pocket. Just make sure your webbing is out of the way, okay? So make sure you saw me just shove that webbing back down there so it's completely out of the way. Okie dokie, now that that's all clipped together, we're going to head over to the sewing machine. Whoop, that was not all clipped together. I lost a clip. Ugh. Okay, now that we're all clipped together, we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around that top where we've just clipped together, and we're going to sew it together with a 3/8 seam allowance, okay? Now, you can also sew a second row of stitches just inside the seam allowance if you wanted to. To be honest, I've never done that, and I don't really know why we would do that. But if you wanted to, if your fabrics are tighter or whatever, or if you wanted to do a basting stitch first before you did the 3/8, okay? But I'm just going to go straight in and do the 3/8 actual stitch straight up, okay? So let's head over to the sewing machine and get this final assembly started. Okie dokie, artichoke. So here we go. So now we are doing that final assembly. So we are doing a 3/8 stitch length, 3/8 seam allowance all along that top edge. I am starting on the flap. You don't have to. You can start wherever you want, whatever feels right for you. This is just where I've started, to be honest. So as you can see, I've got it on a loop. So this is the top bit of my bag. This is the bottom bit. So I have to sew like this because I do not have a cylinder foot machine. Some of you guys might have a cylinder foot or can't remember the other word for it. There's another word for it where you can actually have, like, there's a shelf bit, I guess, that your bag can go underneath. So you can actually sew it with a little easier movement, I guess is the best way to describe it. But I don't, so I sew this way. Most of us will probably be sewing this way, to be honest. I think this is probably the standard way of doing it. If I can find my stiletto, I might be able to let you guys in a little bit more. That's the hard part about sewing loop-de-loop-de-loops. It's hard to get the right angle so that you guys can see everything. Something heavy here, so I'm just double checking that it's not. It is. My webbing is here, so I'm just pushing it out of the way. I just felt it with my finger that there was something there that shouldn't have been there. So that's just something to watch out for, that you're not accidentally sewing that handle, remember. And I just want to remind you guys, your make will not look as messy as mine. Mine looks extra messy because of my quilting. Oh my lord, what a mess I made of this quilting. All of my loose threads, huh? Okie dokie, so that's all done. So let me quickly cut this off. Oh. Okie dokie. So that's that sewn together. I'll bring us back over to the overhead and we will birth it. Okay, so we're at the top angle again. So now that we've sewn it all together, double check your stitches. Make sure that there is no puckering. Everything is smooth and beautiful, and that you've got no skip stitches, which we don't. And now we are going to turn it or birth it. So what we're going to do is you're going to find your slip pocket hole, and then you are going to birth your bag through it. Whew, wish me luck. Okay. Actually, nowhere near as hard as I was thinking this was going to be. Woohoo! obviously I've left a big enough birthing gap. Okay, so once you get it all through the pocket, what you'll end up with is something that looks like this. Your lining and your exterior. Ta-da! And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the lining. Well, actually, before we put the lining inside, we're going to double check that you're happy with all the stitches, okay? Double check that you are happy with it all. If you have loose threads like I do, you can cut them off. Get this all cleaned up. Okie dokie. Now, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull this pocket back out. Because this was our opening, right? We want this closed up. We don't want this to be left open. So what we're going to do now is we are going to match that raw edge to close it up. I like to go in and just poke these corners out first, just to make sure that they're all really nice. And it should fold really easily and beautifully as to how it should fit, because remember, you ironed it or finger pressed it to line it up before, okay? So that's all we're doing. We're just closing this back up, folding that raw edge in and closing up that birthing gap. Okie doke. There you go. And then we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew this shut. After we've sewn that shut, we're going to put it back into the pocket. Put the lining inside the exterior. And then you are going to top stitch the whole perimeter of the bag. Now, the seam allowance that you're going to use is up to you, okay? So, Cindy has here that she tends to use a 1/4 inch. Personally, I tend to use a 1/8 inch because it's like what Cindy said, it's what works for you and what works for your sewing foot. And for my sewing foot, it tends to be a 1/4 inch, okay? So let's head back over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew that shut, and then we're going to top stitch the perimeter, okay? Follow me over. Okie dokie, so let's close up this birthing gap first of all. Now, when we close up the birthing gap, my biggest tip is match your thread colors as best you can. That's my biggest tip most of the time, to be honest. It sounds super obvious, but it is my biggest tip. It's how I think you get the best quality bags, is actually don't skimp on the thread. It means I do have to change threads more often than I like, but it helps produce the best result. Okay, and we are sewing this shut. So I like to go as close to the edge as possible. This is a pocket, so it's not going to be noticeable. Really, no one's pulling a pocket out to double check it, but that's what we're doing. We're just closing that up. Okie doke. There we go. There we go. So that is the birthing gap sewn shut. I'm just getting these threads now because I'll tell you this now. You guys see how lazy I am with cutting threads, right? If I don't cut the birthing gap, as soon as it's done, that birthing gap is going to have threads forever. Okay, now, like what I said, after we've done that, we're putting the pocket, let's move some off this. We're sliding this pocket back in to where it belongs. And then we are going to top stitch the whole perimeter of this bag. So I'm just giving it a little finger press before I bring it back in, and we're going to do a final top stitch. Okay, so when we're top stitching the final perimeter, I like to do it from the flap. Okay, the reason being, and I have a reason for it, is because this is on the back of the bag, okay? So it is the most hidden part, where it'll be hidden by the flap, it'll be hidden by everything else. So it doesn't matter if you tie off your loose ends there, okay? That is my biggest reason. Okay, as you come off the flap, be aware that you might have a difference in height or bulk, so you might need your hump jumper. The reason why I talked so slowly and hand cranked there was because with my machine, I can listen out for skip stitches. I can hear the difference between my stitches catching and my stitches not. I don't know if that's with every machine or if it's just mine, but yeah. There we go. And we're back to where we started, so we're all done. I am going to meet us back over at the overhead. And let's have a look at this bag. And there you go. That's our Belle Original Fab Flap Bag, all top stitched and done. So, off camera, I quickly pulled my threads through and tied it off. So that's why there's no loose threads anymore. So you can have a little look, clip it up, make sure. Oh, it's so cute. Look at it. Oh my God, I'm obsessed. That's my little girl saying, can you see, in case you guys heard that. Yeah, I'm in love. I am loving, I know this isn't technically quilting because I didn't have the puffiness from the stabilizer, but I am loving this. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Awesome. So let's go through the bag one more time. So we've got the magnetic snap, front slip pocket, back slip pocket, D-rings to attach your crossbody strap or just a shoulder strap. Open it up. You've got your zipper pocket and you've got your slip pocket. Oh, I didn't actually push my corners back in for the slip pocket. Now, if you wanted to make a crossbody strap, now's the time to do it as well. So make sure you sew up your crossbody strap. I'm not going to sew it on the tutorial because most of you, I think, have done one. If not, the instructions are there. I'm not going to lie, I am being lazy by not filming it. Sorry. But so that is your bag. Now, one thing I wanted to talk to us about. A lot of bag makers think, yep, that's it. I've done my bag. We're all done. Woohoo! Yes, it's true. But if you can, get a towel, get something in the bag, stuff it in, fill that bag up and let it sit overnight, okay? Let it sit how you would like the bag to look. And let it sit in that position overnight because that helps the bag settle into its shape, okay? So do take the time to do that. I know a lot of bag makers don't. And to be honest, to me, that's the biggest difference between a bag that looks amazing and a bag that doesn't quite do that. It's giving it time to sit and get its shape. Because no matter what, this bag has just come out of a sewing machine. You've just birthed it. You've just manipulated it and did all of these things. So give it time to sit. Let it know what you expect it to do. But anyway, that is it. So let's head back over and say goodbye. Ta-da! And there you have it. We're all done. That's your Fab Flap Bag by Belle Originals. Thank you so much for joining along and sewing along with me. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I do bag chats, I do information on bag making and tutorials. So I do hope you subscribe. If there are products that I've used in this video, I will have links in the description below. Some of these are affiliate links, so if they are, I might get a small payout from the vendors. So if you do click on them and purchase anything, thank you so much for supporting me and my little business. But otherwise, it's Sam from Made by Ireland. I had a ball sewing with you guys. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!